Marketing today is being redefined by one core capability: the ability to connect and activate data across the entire customer journey. When marketers track cross-channel signals effectively, they gain a unified view of how customers move between digital and physical touchpoints, enabling a seamless omni-channel experience. The business impact is clear. Companies that personalize customer experience across all channels can actually see a 5% to 15% increase in the revenue. Yes, that's huge. This highlights how strongly connected data and relevant engagement can influence growth. And at the center of this shift is a move towards continuous data driven planning. Leading organizations interpret intent across touchpoints, combining behavioral signals to understand what customers are likely to do next and how to engage them at the right moment. This is where an intelligence led growth engine takes shape. It brings together intent prediction, real time personalization, and clear measurement of outcomes. Each interaction becomes more relevant, and every action contributes to measurable business impact. Today's keynote brings into focus what becomes possible when intelligence, data, and strategy come together to drive real and measurable growth. Our keynote speaker today is someone who truly needs no introduction in the world of marketing strategy and technology. Please join me in welcoming Martin Kihn, Senior Vice President of Strategy for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Martin has spent years at the forefront of marketing transformation, helping organizations understand how data, technology, and strategy come together to drive meaningful growth. Prior to this, he was a research vice president at Gartner, where he advised Fortune 500 companies on marketing strategy and the evolving role of marketing technology. He is also a well-known author with 4+ books to his name, including House of Lies, which was adapted into a television series by Showtime, and the second one being CDP, Use People Data to Transform Marketing Engagement, where he explores how organizations can leverage customer data to transform engagement at scale. And a fun fact that not many people may know, Martin has also served as the head writer for the iconic show Pop-Up Video in the late 90s. With his deep expertise at the intersection of data, AI, and marketing strategy, he's perfectly placed to help us understand how intelligence-led growth is being built and scaled today. So here's Martin speaking on the intelligence-led growth engine, predicting intent, personalizing at scale, and proving impact. Hello, Martin. Welcome to the show. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Devanshi, and thank you to my friends at Grazidi for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I want to talk about the intelligence-led growth engine and all the excitement that's going on in the world of agentic marketing. As was mentioned, I lead the product strategy team for Salesforce Marketing Cloud. I also have a number of books, most recently Agent Force, which is about agentic AI, and CDP, which is it's about 5 years old now, but that was the first book and is still the book about CDP. That's kind of a reference. I recommend those to you. If any of you actually would like a copy of Agent Force, just send me a note. I'll send you one. Happy to do that. So let's dive in here to talk about a subject that probably none of you talk about ever with anybody, which is AI. I'm kidding. At every conference I go to, every single session is about AI now. I think for good reason. There's a lot going on. I think that as marketers, though, we are responsible for communicating with customers and accounts. It's a human interaction. It has to be very responsive to changes both in customer behavior and customer expectation. That's what makes marketing so difficult, actually, compared to other disciplines, is because we have to deal with something that is very difficult to predict, which is human behavior. And I think what's happened in the world of AI now with ChatGPT and so on is people have become used to slowly getting a response from just about any channel. So if they're in your app, they're expecting a response. If they're on your site, they're expecting more of a personalized response than in the past. It's an expectations people bring to your platform. So we have to be ready. We as marketers have to be ready. Last year, coming into this year, was a big inflection point. I think about 3 years ago, we launched Agentforce, and people were doing a lot more talking about agents at that point than doing. Then there were some pilots, and I've just noticed over the last 6 months a lot more kind of in-market implementations. A lot of them are employee-facing agents, which is a little bit safer, good place to start. But many of them are customer-facing, and particularly in customer service. So I think there's a lot of potential. We are still in the early stages. I think there's still a first-mover advantage in just about any field, except outside of technology. Tech firms like Salesforce, Google, Microsoft are all over this. So it's hard to get a first mover advantage in that space. But if you're in any other industry, the winning is there for you, just if you make a move. There is some danger in moving too fast. People get very excited about AI and they want to kind of launch in market, not more than experiments. They want to put things in front of customers. This is just an example of McDonald's. There's others. I don't mean to pick on them, but they had a voice agent, and there were a lot of quite funny videos on TikTok where people got like 100 McNuggets and stuff like that. Apparently, it's very difficult in an uncontrolled space to have a voice agent that can decipher what you're saying and then separate it from the background. But they've relaunched it, and it works better now. I think the biggest impact we're seeing, at least I'm seeing with the customers these days, is around SEO and GEO, sometimes called AEO, which is so search engine optimization versus generative AI engine optimization, or AI engine optimization. And what's happening is, it's depending on the category, depending on the customer, there's been a big drop in site traffic. And they're wondering why. And of course, the answer is that people go to GPT and they ask questions, having an interaction, and they don't necessarily click through to the site as much. It's not true across the board, but it's becoming truer. So every adept marketer that I know is getting in front of this. There are things that you can do both to the structure of your site, content on your site, and so on. And starting with measuring, how are you showing up in the various AI engines? And in fact, you will show up differently, believe it or not, in Perplexity, OpenAI, Anthropic, and you may wonder why. Why does Anthropic love me and OpenAI doesn't? And it's difficult to tease it out, but these are different companies and these are different AI platforms. So in terms of AI applications for marketing now, I'd say realistic here. These are the ones that I think are, I've seen the top level here in the near term, in market, working, actually delivering value today. The next level are a little bit more kind of in the pilot experimental phase. And then the emerging one, that's an area where there's still work to be done, and I think a lot more potential actually. But in the top one, always on customer agents. Well, Agentforce is Salesforce's platform. It sits on top of the Salesforce platform, but it's basically an agentic AI platform. But so we look at data from that, and we were, I guess, not surprised, but the greatest adoption by far was in the customer service space at first, not marketing. Marketing is more complex. Marketing has campaigns, there's a lot of moving pieces, but in customer service, what it costs for a human being to answer a call and resolve an issue or answer a question. Where's my product? Can I do a return? Might cost you $11 for that call. If you can agentify some of those, so deflect, call deflection, and have no human involved there, you can save money. So say you could do it for $2 with an agent. So it's a clear economic argument. Marketing is more difficult. Marketing is notoriously difficult to measure. And CEOs are reluctant, I've noticed, to give CMOs money for AI. They want AI to pay for itself. They're saying, well, you'll have greater uplift, you save a lot on efficiency. And so all of that savings, you can invest in technology. Maybe not. In the short term, it's harder to see financial results. So campaign creation is straightforward. I think where a lot of marketers started with content creation. Obviously, you can write emails well, and so on. I think then moving into the next level is more analytical. So predictive journey orchestration, which would be a cross-channel journey. So not just which is the right email to send and craft, but if our customer shows up on the site, how do we respond? Or if they happen to show up in the app, how do we respond? Or if they go up to our kiosk in the mall, how do we respond there? It's truly across, it should be as real-time as possible. It's a cross-journey optimization. And then the bottom part, emerging agent to agent, so multi-agent ecosystems, I think is very exciting. These, I mean, there's some today, clearly, there are agents talking to agents. I think the model there would be something I heard talked about years ago, which is, I have my shopper agent that knows exactly what I like, and it would go out and comb the internet for deals while I'm sleeping and come back to me with, it would talk to, retailer agents, and they'd strike a deal, and they'd come back to me in the morning with, do you like this or that? And I, have all these great outfits that suit me perfectly, that are right in my price point. That's, could happen, will happen. An example of what's happening right now, though, is Pandora is a jewelry based in Europe, but it is global, and it's a jewelry chain. They sell kind of nice jewelry, including charms. They're known for their charms, but they adopted. They were fast movers, actually. They have a personal shopper agent, which is an interactive kind of shopping experience on their app or their site, where you can talk about the gift you want to give or something for yourself, and it will surface recommendations. And then an AI service agent. This is, as I was alluding to before, a very, very common scenario where you have a call center staff, hardworking people who answer calls and queries from people out in the world, and customers and prospects. And it turns out in most call centers, about 80% of calls are very predictable. Where is my package? Can I make a return? What are your store hours? Things like that. So a lot of that can be automated, and I think customers are fine with that. As long as it's resolved quickly. So I think that is an area that we're seeing a lot of success already. But as I said earlier, agentic adoption is it's not as high as you might think, considering how much I am, and I'm sure you are working kind of in technology, around technology, and we assume everyone's adopting agents right and left, and that's not necessarily true. I have been surprised at the customers and how tentative they've been, but in the tech world, massive adoption, and in a few other spaces as well. But this is encouraging. So I do want to encourage you out there to place some bets. There's still an opportunity to be the most advanced in your field and among your competitive set. So investment priorities for marketers, we always start with looking in the short term. I think you'd agree with this. I used to be a management consultant. As mentioned, I wrote a book called A House of Lies. That's about management consulting. So we did a lot of 2x2s. Since it's hard to shake that habit. But so you start with what's short term and incremental. So that would be kind of low hanging fruit. You're not going to get massive returns, but they're easy to do, and you can test it out. That would be content generation with AI, summary notes. We do this all the time. Chatbot facts, so frequently asked question deflections. We have something on our site, Salesforce.com, where you can ask questions about products and pricing, and it gets a lot of traction, a lot of interest. It's using unstructured data on the back end, product descriptions and so on. But it has cut down greatly in the need for humans to do that kind of work. And then priority plays would be more transformational, but in the short term, it's analytical. It's next best action, looking around life intent. So ideally, the agent would have access to more data than an individual would have. At least it would be able to process it more quickly, so it could take advantage of real-time signals and incorporate that into predictive models. And it could develop more interesting insights, potentially, than even the data science team, faster about certain important triggers that are indicating what somebody might be about to or might be interested in purchasing. And another trigger would be detection that someone is likely to churn. It's sometimes AI, because it has access to more signals and also does kind of a deeper version of number crunching. It's also slightly unpredictable, can come up with some very interesting insights around what makes people churn. And then building toward dynamic web personalization in the longer term, omni-channel next best action. So that is picking the right message and treatment across channels in real time, which I alluded to before. And then the future vision would be fully agentic marketing. When I say fully agentic, there's human in the loop, there's human approved, and then there's this idea of autonomous AI. And that would be an AI that you trust. It's obeying your guardrails. It's tightly defined. It's in a kind of a narrow space, but you don't necessarily watch it. You look at the results, monitor, anomalies. But that is autonomous AI. That's I would say, not very common today, particularly in the customer facing, because there's a lot of risk. You're putting stuff in front of your customer, it could come back to haunt you. People ask me who's doing it well, and I always look at high-end retail. This was true before AI, and it's still true today. And it's because high retail invests a lot in their channels. They need a premium experience on the site and the app, and if they have a kiosk in the store or even in the dressing rooms, they have kind of magic screens and so on. So they always invest a lot because each customer in this context is worth a lot. They have high lifetime value, potentially high lifetime value. The average like Chanel or Cartier customer is worth thousands of dollars. So at any rate, I look at them and they are doing interesting stuff. A more Pacific, I mentioned, is a South Korean retailer, and they are, people are interacting with robots in their locations, and the robots are analyzing their skin tone, coming up with, custom makeup blends for them. I haven't done this myself, but at any rate, it's more than just a gag or a gimmick. It actually comes up with exactly the right makeup for you. And then ING, they're very adept at doing, I think because it's financial services, analytics. And so they've focused more on the kind of the analytical part and also a disciplined process. It's another European company. I didn't want to be too US centric here. So it's another great European company, and they are detecting like hidden affluence. So people who are not, they haven't been necessarily labeled as high net worth or, in their traditional demographic scoring, but they're giving signals that either they just made a lot of money or they have it and they're not telling you about it, or you just didn't know. And so that's very useful for a company like ING, useful information. How agentic marketing works across vendors, I think just in general, how I see it working and emerging and where we're going is there needs to be a unified customer profile. And that's no joke. That's, I talked about the CDP book earlier, Customer Data Platform. That's where that plays, the whole category of CDPs. And you may or may not have a CDP, but you have to solve this unified customer profile problem, identity management, mapping the right fields to the across different databases and so on. Anyway, that is the foundation, as I'm sure we all know, and it needs to be as real time as possible, and also these days needs to incorporate as much unstructured data that's relevant, particularly to agents as possible. And by unstructured, I mean text, imagery, video, particularly like call center transcripts, product descriptions. All that stuff is just gold to agents. They can really use that stuff. And so campaign agents would be focused around campaign development, campaign creation. Orchestration would be, once you have the campaign developed, you know who you want to target it to. It's more around decisioning, when to serve what, how to branch people through journeys. And then activation agents are right in front of the customer. And this would be two-way conversations, recommendation support, lead nurturing. An example here would be a simple example, actually. We launched a kind of a two-way email. So, generally when a company sends out an email, it says do not reply, or even if it doesn't say do not reply, you can't really reply. So what if that changed? And so that there would be a way to implement this, and you can reply. You can ask a question to the email, and it won't be a person answering it, it'll be an agent. So it turns something like email, which is not very glamorous, into a two-way back and forth. That's a simple example. You can see kind of more complex examples all over the place. I think the point I want to make about this is LLMs, large language models alone, are not enough for success. So GPT came out, GPT-3, 3 years ago, whatever, and we're all very excited, and we're like, oh, this can generate content. And there were a lot of kind of one-off implementations in the enterprise context. It'd be like, all right, I have OpenAI, I have an OpenAI account. Let me just start using it for marketing. That doesn't work particularly in a big company context. And the reason is there's too many other considerations. And the fact of the matter is these LLMs are non-deterministic. Someone who very, very smart person who knew a lot about math was trying to tell me that that's not exactly right, but at any rate, for your and my purposes, they're non-deterministic. They're essentially somewhat unpredictable. That is the power of the LLM. if you think about it. Because if you put an input in one end and you kind of knew what would come out the other end, it wouldn't be any better than what we had before. But now, you could put an input in here, you get very interesting stuff out of it. That unpredictability is its superpower. But on the other hand, if you're dealing with customers and you're using these engines to make decisions, that are going to affect your relationship with your customer and your customer's impression of your brand and your account's impression of it's a whole kind of another level of pain. And then the other thing is around governance and regulation and the line of business, your financial services, you're in healthcare. There are all kinds of rules that need to be respected. So around this LLM, there needs to be a scaffolding somehow of all kinds of other things. And those other things include the ability to do retrieval augmented generation, which is simply taking your own first-party proprietary data sitting in your own systems like your CRMs and making that available to the agents in a way that you're not leaking any data, you're not leaking any first-party, personally identifiable information. You're not helping these models train on your data so that then can be kind of reconstructed later, et cetera. And then things around automation and AI semantics, metadata, the ability to incorporate unstructured data, and so on and so forth. And I think guardrails are very important. There are ways to deal with this. There are platforms out there. I mentioned Agentforce. There are others. There are ways to construct it from open source, but a lot of thought, as I'm sure needs to go into using the LLMs in the marketing context. Marketing AI readiness, these are observations I've made just over the past 3 years looking at marketers implementing AI. They are not mind-blowing, I don't think here, but they happen to be true. So data infrastructure is the most important. I think, the most important is organizational willingness to not have a perfect solution right away, so that there's an organizational component to it. And also humility, like an ability, a desire to learn. How can I use these tools? They're not as easy as they look. And then, so the data infrastructure is absolutely critical, though. The data pipelines, the structure of the data, the data hygiene, it was always important, of course, but it's more important. Governance and safety, talent and roles. I say here, invest in AI literacy. It starts from the top, by the way. People often think, well, you have the entry-level staff, we'll train them up on AI, and then it'll trickle up. But in fact, it's the opposite that works. It's get the CEO really excited about AI, and almost 100% of them are now. So that job is done. But educate them, tell them the limitations of these tools. That trickles down to the C-suite, then trickles down to directors and so on. And so the AI literacy has to happen simultaneously. Kind of think of it as an NVIDIA chip doing all this parallel processing. So we're all learning in parallel, no matter what level we are. But it needs to start from the top and go down. And realistic expectations need to be set at the highest levels. And then start small, build fast. People always say that. I think in this case, it's with agents particularly true. The best agents I've seen they're narrowly defined. They have a lane, like if they do expense report approval, that's it. And they only have access to expense data and the policy, and clear rules about when they can't approve, and they have to send it to a person. So it's extremely narrow. You can have a lot of narrowly focused agents working together. And that's where you can get real success, kind of an agent swarm or an orchestrated group of agents. But the power of each individual agent is a lot around focus. The Agentic marketing org, I've thought about this recently quite a bit, and I think of it in a positive way. I think a lot of the kind of channel-specific admin work will be automated. It seems quite clear. Email manager work, search stuff, things around, and even some on the analytics side. There's a lot of cutting and pasting still going on in Excel and so on. So I think a lot of that will be automated, but those people will be promoted to where even the lowest level, entry level, like first year employee is going to be a manager, and they're going to be managing agents. They're going to have 5 or 6 agents. When I say manage, I mean they can start them, they can end them, fire them, they give them performance reviews. It's kind of like having a staff. So we've all been promoted in a way. I don't think CMO goes away. I think brand and strategy are as important as ever. Very human. Strategy. What is my brand? How does it feel? What does it look like to people? And then data and AI science. You're gonna always need highly technical, very, very aware, very astute people who really know how these models work, and can deal with their limitations, but also capitalize on their strengths. Just a couple of more points here. Agentic marketing driving transformation. So I think in general, like the third one is the one people think about: capacity constraints. So where there were things you wanted to be able to do in the past, but you couldn't do it because you didn't have enough people, which is like every company's problem, particularly in customer service, but also in marketing. Now you can potentially do it. You'll expand the human workforce. Capacity constraint, not such a big deal. There's static reports, so interaction with your data, conversations with your data. You can do this in Tableau now, and so on. Very useful in natural language conversations. One-way channels become experiences, and then data powered by agents. When I say one-way channels become experiences, that's more like a scenario here would be like we have a customer I know of in Brazil, and they use WhatsApp. And so, their customers go to WhatsApp and they have a customer service question, pricing question, something about their order. That can be resolved, using AI agent, and it can morph into a marketing conversation. Well, this, once the problem has been solved, have you heard about this product or that product? So it's blurring the line between service and marketing, and it's in an interesting channel in that market. That's a very important channel. So just a few thoughts. There's still, as I said, an earlier mover advantage. I think it's an exciting time, terrifying time, but exciting also to be exploring this multi-agent ecosystems and all this idea of autonomous, self-driving car campaigns. That is farther away than many people think. I think there are steps that need to be, and even to get organizations comfortable with that idea. The gap is around data, talent, governance. Governance has become more important each year, and it's also become more technical. So governance is basically who has access to what, how do we know our data is accurate, et cetera. Technology isn't usually the problem. There's a lot of open source technology that's really good if you know how to use it. And then successful agents, as I said, focus on narrowly defined tasks. So it's my pleasure to present to you today. As I said, you can take me up on my Agentforce book offer if you'd like, and I will hand it back to the team.
Thank you so much, Martin, for that insightful keynote. What really stood out was the clarity on how organizations can move from simply collecting data to actually activating it with purpose. And you explained it really well. You can see the comments from the audience. The way you framed intelligence as a driver of decisions, not just reporting, gives everyone a strong direction here to build on. And before we move on, if any of the attendees wish to contribute to a conversation or you have questions, please type them in the chat or Q&A section, as every attendee is in the listen-only mode and you can participate through chat. Also, feel free to bring in your appreciation for our speakers with different reactions present to you in the form of emoticons. With that, we now move on to our first panel discussion, that is predictive analytics in practice, from data overload to confident decisions. See you all there.